welcome everybody. Let's get the show on the road. Hello everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. I'm so glad y'all are here. Thank y'all for coming. We're really glad to have you today for our pay-to-play politics luncheon. I think everybody is already starting to enjoy their lunch, and they will bring the entrees out in just a moment. My name is Ann Drum, and I am the North Texas organizer for American Promise, a national nonpartisan organization building grassroots support for a constitutional amendment to address runaway political spending and to protect our elections from foreign money and special interests. So I want to thank the supporters that have made this event possible today. First and foremost, we are grateful for the generosity of the Dallas-based Sumner's Foundation, which is the legacy of Congressman Hatton W. Sumner's, who served North Texas in Congress from 1912 until 1947. I also want to thank these sponsors: Clean Elections Texas, Dallas Jewish Conservatives, Ladies of Liberty Texas Federated Women's Club, Meritocracy Avenue, and in particular my friend Kathleen Lieberman, Patriot Movement of Texas, and Take Back Our Republic. So I also, yes, thank you. We have some special guests in the room, and I want to recognize them as well. So special guests, when I call your name, if you would either raise your hand high or stand up so we can see you, we'd appreciate it. And audience, please, let's reserve our applause until I've recognized all of our guests. First, we have Ashley Thomas, Deputy District Director for Senator Ted Cruz. Great. We have, from Representative Colin Allred's staff, we have Andrew Krause, the Congressman's Director of Outreach. Jan McDowell, candidate for the 24th Congressional District of Texas, is here. Alejandro Arrieta, candidate for Texas House of Representatives District 103, is here. Elizabeth Ginsburg, candidate for Texas House of Representatives District 108, is here. Two former elected officials are with us: former Dallas City Councilwoman Sandy Grayson and former Dallas County Sheriff Lupe Valdez. We have, oh, there's more. We have a group of volunteers here from Braver Angels. This is an organization that brings conservatives and progressives together to understand our differences, find common ground where it exists, and help the country we all love find a way to bridge the partisan divide. And every time I have rehearsed this, I have choked up on that line. We also have some volunteers that work with me for American Promise. The Sumner's Foundation, today's sponsor, issues scholarships to university and law students in Texas and Oklahoma. And we have Sumner scholars from North Texas and beyond who are joining us today on Zoom. And then we have a group of students in the room, including students from the University of North Texas at Dallas and also from Collin College and SMU. So students, if y'all would raise your hands so we can see y'all over there. So everybody, please welcome all of our special guests. If you need Wi-Fi during the program, the network is PCC Guest, and the password is membership. So you have a handout with biographies of our panelists. I am not going to read them. Please be assured that our panelists are all very well qualified to talk about the problem of runaway political spending and the solution. Our panelists are former Dallas Mayor Tom Leppert, former chair of the Federal Elections Commission Ann Ravel, American Promise Board Chair John Wass, and American Promise President Jeff Clements. And I'm going to now turn the program over to American Promise President Jeff Clements.
Thank you, Ann. Can you all hear me? I just wanted to say y'all. I'm from Boston, so I'm glad you can hear me. It's so nice to be here in your lovely city with such great weather. And I want to thank Ann so much. She has been a super leader. We call our volunteers, and I'm one of them, at American Promise. We refer to us as citizen leaders. And we think every American, in a lot of ways, is a citizen leader, whether you're running for office or serving in any capacity, which Americans do so much of. And so we're trying to create a space so we can come together and serve our country for, as the title says, a constitutional moment to restore sanity. And I don't know how you feel about that title, whether you're feeling there's some sanity that needs restoring, but many Americans do. And that's what we're going to talk about, how we make our republic a healthy one again. And we think we've got a pretty good idea, but it's not just our idea. We got this, much of what you're going to hear in terms of the constitutional solution we're proposing, from our fellow Americans in rooms all over the country, thanks to the Sumner's Foundation and our other supporters from a project we called Writing the 28th Amendment. We saw it as an opportunity for Americans to engage in town hall settings all over the country. And we think it's there yet, but as you'll note, we think it's there, but it may not be there yet, and it can be improved. You'll see it in your handout, the actual language where it stands now, but there's also a QR code so you can give feedback and ideas. And we think it's, we've done 27 amendments from the Bill of Rights to one allowing our young Americans, 18, 19, 20-year-olds, to vote, and all of them were in different eras of technology, and we think now we can do QR codes and have input. There's no reason why every American can't be at the table to help shape what this looks like, to get us out of a jam. So let me turn to the jam. My job is to set up sort of all on the same page about what the data shows around the role of money in our political system now, what it's doing to the country, and a bit of background on the amendment, and then bring up my colleagues on the panel to have a conversation about it from their different perspectives. And then, of course, we'll open it up for your questions and comments as well. So I'm going to just run through some slides while they finish their lunch, and then Ann and John and Tom will be up here to join me. So American democracy in crisis. There's a lot of different expressions of that. We can have different views about how we define the crisis and who's to blame and so on. But I think, there's a lot of times where you see two different kind of conversations, a political sort of media conversation with a lot of finger pointing and a lot of division. And then if you look closely, which we have, you actually see another conversation, which is a lot more hopeful, where there's a lot more consensus and a lot more hunger to actually roll up our sleeves and solve it. And we're seeing that here. So most Americans actually agree our republic, our democracy is in crisis. Interestingly, 86% say the number one reason is the role of money in politics. And you don't actually hear that very much with all the division, that we are fundamentally agreed on one big major thing that most Americans think is driving a lot of the dysfunction in different ways and seems out of control. So let's just drill in a little bit, because we see it on our screens, we see it in our press, we see it in our politics, this perception that money from all over the place is pouring in and driving a lot of toxic, divisive kind of attacks and campaigns. And if you think it's grown worse, it sure has. It's essentially doubling in each cycle. Ann Ravel, a former FEC commissioner, federal election commissioner, will join us to update this to 2022. But this is an accelerating problem in terms of billions of dollars. The other thing, and it's from all sources, wealthy donors, super PACs, corporations, unions, and now even foreign entities are interfering in our elections through spending, through the different ways that it can now happen that we cannot control. You have a common thing now in U.S. Senate races, which is essentially the entry fee is $200 million. we had a 2020 race in Maine, near where I'm from, New England, Susan Collins' seat, $200 million, about evenly divided, 100 on each side. And that's a state where there's barely 1 million people. There's not much of a media market. It didn't even make the top 5. $200 million didn't even make the top 5. So this is a chart of the top 5 most expensive races in 2020 compared to the top 5 Senate races only about a decade ago. Actually, a decade from 2020. So this is the 10 years since a well-known Supreme Court decision struck down the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act and said that we're not allowed to limit outside spending, as it's called, under a theory that that's free speech. So this is what's happened in just one slice of our political life, Senate races. You can barely see what most of us thought was a lot of money in 2010, right? And it's now gone exponentially higher. The other thing it's doing is concentrating. So most of this money is now coming from a smaller and smaller slice of elite donors. Most Americans don't make any contribution. $200 is considered a major contribution. And now you have spenders who are literally writing $100 million checks to super PACs that is then distributed out to races. So it's bipartisan. This is not pointing fingers. This is a systemic problem. This is dark money. That's the money that we don't know where it comes from. It's not disclosed. Nobody knows. And the red is the red and the blue is the blue. And both parties have figured it out. And it's getting worse and worse and worse. Sometimes the Democrats spend more, sometimes the Republicans spend more, but it's now baked into our system that there's billions of dollars flowing in that we don't know where it comes from. Here in Texas, I always try to have a slide for the state. I haven't gone anywhere where I can't make a slide that shows out of control on both sides in your state. So those are some headlines. If you look at them closely, and you have these in front of you too to take home, they're one side or the other. Both sides are spending in very big ways here in Texas. What is the effect of this? It's not just that campaigns cost a lot. It's tearing us apart, and it's a massive way of spending billions of dollars to convince Americans that we really can't trust our system, that somebody else is paying for it, that it doesn't work, that you can't trust any elected official because they're always, you're getting these billions of dollars of stuff at us, and civic trust is collapsing. This is I guess what they call a longitudinal study over decades from the Pew Research, and the trust in government, those who think you can basically count on the government to try in its honest way to serve the larger interests of the country, versus those who think it is completely controlled by a few small interests. Those who believe the latter are now almost everybody, and those who believe the former, i.e. that government may not always be perfect, but it's trying its best. Almost nobody thinks that anymore. It's a collapse in trust in each other, in the outcome of elections, in whether we can count on each other. It's a very concerning thing in a form of government that relies on some level of trust that the system is fair and honest, and we can compete for our different views on that field. Now, I mentioned the Supreme Court. There have been a lot of Supreme Court cases. Ann might, former FEC Commissioner Ravel might take us in a little deeper. But fundamentally, it's a theory. It's a new experiment in American life these last few decades that the First Amendment free speech prohibits us from regulating what's called outside money or independent expenditures. That's a violation of the free speech rights of those who can write those $100 million checks. And so we've lost the ability for that reason to enact laws that could address this better, because those get struck down as violations of the First Amendment. We don't think that's correct. Most Americans don't think that's correct. Many judges and lawyers don't think that's correct. And it's built on a couple of premises that have now been tested for the last decade or so that turn out that they're not true. ingratiation and access, the court thought, aren't corruption. That means like gratitude for getting those big checks or those campaigns, and extra access that wealthy donors get isn't corruption. Most Americans think that's not true, and I personally think they're right. The appearance of influence and or access will not cause the electorate to lose faith in our democracy. The court said even though people might, in the court's view, wrongly think that it's not corrupt to have this spending, even if people thought that, they wouldn't lose faith in our democracy. Well, I go back to that. That was wrong too. People have lost faith. So we have a constitutional problem. We can't just fix this without a constitutional solution. That's why we have the title, A Constitutional Moment to Restore Sanity. And so we just want one last slide on free speech. This is David Trahan, our friend, American Promise supporter, former Republican state senator, head of the largest Second Amendment hunting and fishing group in Maine. Pretty influential. After that $200 million race, he joined our cause. He said it was like being under an avalanche. Nobody could hear us, and we couldn't hear each other. So he felt, and again, he's powerful in a state, that he had and they had no free speech rights, that the money was all coming from outside. They couldn't even buy airtime. It was all bought up by the outside money. Businesses are getting on board. A couple of our business leaders, Pirelli Tire, global public company based in Georgia, the American operation. Dave Black, head of the Harrisburg Chamber, Harrisburg, Pennsylvania Chamber, saying, again, this isn't free speech and it's hurting business and innovation. So the constitutional solution, we call it the 4R Freedom Amendment. Again, you have it in front of you. We're not forcing it down anybody. If you have a better way to phrase it, we want to know. But we think it's pretty good. Why a constitutional solution? Well, as I said, we have to do it, but also it has great advantage. We're forced to unite to get it done. We'll need 2/3 of Congress, ratification in 38 states. So like a lot of good big things, when Americans set out to do them, it has a lot of good benefit besides. We get to work together and do something big together, and that's what we're going to need to do here. That's the unity and consensus. It already exists. As I said, somewhere between 75 and 85% want this now. I think the remainder aren't really that hard against it. They just want a little more time to figure it out. That's okay. We got that time. Federalism, it's not a solution that says what Texas has to do versus Massachusetts versus anyone else. It says you have the ability to decide that for yourself. Congress can decide that in federal elections, states in state elections. But what we can't continue to do is do nothing to solve the problem. As I said, I'll just go through these fast so we can get the wonderful panelists up here. Massive support. These are studies we've done in the states. It's a real consensus. There's the language. You have it in front of you. We're going to talk about it now. And so come on up here, Tom, John, and Ann. And they backgrounds, as Ann Drum said, are in front of you, and we'll have a conversation about it. Sorry, I set a bad example. I didn't know that. I don't think so. Ann, why don't you just come up here and... I'll sit on the end. Great. So we have a few minutes. I'm going to ask some questions of our panelists, who all have different perspectives. We won't tell you who, but there's at least there's more. There's actually politics is a little confusing these days. So I think I can honestly say there's a few Democrats, a few Republicans, and a few independents, even though there's only 4 of us. But we have different political backgrounds and allegiances. But we're not even going to need to get into that because we have I think a conversation we want to have together. These different perspectives are also reflected in different backgrounds, and I think together they're going to be real helpful to all of us to continue this conversation. I'm going to start it off with Ann Ravel, who is a federal election commissioner, the chair of the Federal Election Commission that's responsible for enforcing the campaign finance laws and election laws in America. She served till 2017. Before that, was doing that in California, a very big state where lots of money is spent, and enforcing the ethics rules there. Left in 2017. So she has seen this up close from that perspective of trying to enforce the laws, and I assume finding that more and more difficult. So I'm going to ask you, Anne, what happened in your experience? What went wrong? I think when you left the commission in 2017, you were quoted as saying, "It is worse than dysfunctional." What did you mean?
Well, what I meant by that was the purpose of the commission, which was enacted by Congress after Watergate because of the bags of money, and mostly foreign money, that were taken to the White House for the purpose of paying off the burglars. That's when the whole country was upset with campaign finance and money in politics for the first time, really, or at least the most strongly. And so the whole purpose of the commission was disclosure, oversight over the money in politics. And the problem with what has happened, and this was not always true, there have been numbers of people over the years in the commission who were both Republicans and Democrats, and some who identified themselves as independents, and they were very happy to enforce the law. But by the time I got there, it had become so divided that it was almost impossible to do anything. There are 6 members of the commission. Requires 4 votes to do anything. We could not even hire an attorney, a general counsel. We could not agree on that, which should be basic. So for years, there was no general counsel. There was an acting who was someone who was already in the office. But really, the problem was whenever there were issues such as foreign money in politics, which we know is illegal and bad for our democracy, we could not even agree on then, and they still can't, but very well, but we couldn't even agree on getting disclosure on the internet, for example, just like what's required in newspapers and any other ads on TV, but we couldn't do that, and that was the problem because a lot of foreign money, we know in 2016 from Russia, was funneling through the social media. And I will say at the, I don't want to take forever on this, but at the commission itself, because I suggested that we do something about this problem, I said, do we want Putin to be intervening in our elections? And there's actually an article about this in the newspaper about how prescient I was in 2015 to say that.
Yeah, and there's now a recent intel report on China, Iran, and other nations exploiting these. They can do a super PAC, they can do an LLC, all kinds of things that didn't exist before 2010 are now vehicles to have unaccountable money. What happened with the Supreme Court in your view? How did it happen that we even have something called a super PAC, or that corporations and unions, which were prohibited from spending to influence elections, now have free reign?
Well, you were very right in what you said. There's been kind of a progress. First, there was a case, Buckley versus Vallejo, that essentially talked about the ability of people to have pretty much any expenditures in campaigns, but that was exacerbated by Citizens United. And then it was again exacerbated by a case called McCutcheon, which said that people could bundle and in ways that was not giving direct money, but they could be bundling and exceed the campaign limitations. So it's just been a really odd view on the part of the Supreme Court, one that, yes, we do care about corruption, but as you mentioned, unless it's quid pro quo corruption, we don't care that much. It's okay. We think that this is just a speech issue. And as you indicated, it is not just a speech issue. There was even a case in Arizona, which was a very odd case of the Supreme Court, and pretty bad, I think. There was a public financing measure in Arizona. But what they did was, if one of the candidates got an excessive amount of money from outside sources, and the other candidate who was getting public financing could not compete, they would augment the amount of public money that went to the candidate who was getting money from public sources. And the Supreme Court struck that down, saying that it was a violation of the First Amendment rights of the others who were getting independent expenditures in unlimited amounts.
Yeah. Okay. Supreme Court, series of interpretations changing how the Constitution enabled us to enforce or protect ourselves from outside money from all sorts of different sources. Probably also social media and other technological developments creating all kinds of ways for this influence to be paid for. Ann has run for state senator in California. It's a big race there in a big state like Texas. Probably very expensive. Mayor Tom Leppert, mayor of Dallas, has run and served and ran for the U.S. Senate in the Republican primary in the era of this kind of money. Before that, of course, CEO, I joked with Tom, he got me into law school. He was CEO of Kaplan, which has an excellent LSAT course to help you prepare for those tests. So thank you for that. But I wanted to ask you, as somebody who's been on the inside of trying to run for office in a somewhat chaotic and out of control money system, my words, maybe not yours, what was your experience of it? How do you see the problem, Tom?
Appreciate it. First of all, Jeff, I'd say thank you for having me on the panel. It's a pleasure to be with all of you. I'm not associated with American Promise, but I will tell you that I think it's important to have this dialogue. So regardless of where you fall on the spectrum, either from a political standpoint or relative to the constitutional amendment that American Promise is proposing, this sort of dialogue, I think, is absolutely critical. I have an enormous concern about the campaign financing in this country. I think it's absolutely broken. I think probably all of us can agree on that. But you'll see my comments go a little bit further than that, and they're a little bit broader. I look today at a complete bifurcation between the American people and between the governmental systems, e.g. Congress, and the executive branch. A complete bifurcation between those two groups. And that, I think, is where the real challenge is. Now, campaign financing is an absolutely critical element of that. As Jeff's numbers indicated, if you look at it from 2000 to 2020, so a relatively short period of time of 2 decades, even working through inflation, it's a 4x increase. And importantly, what's happening is not the campaign financing at the general election level. The way the politicians have structured it, general elections don't mean anything anymore. In the House today, there's probably about 40 races that are competitive. If this is a watershed year, it might be 50 or 60. That's substantially less than the 60 seats the Republicans won in 2014 when it was one of those landslides, so to speak, in the Obama era. It'll be much smaller than that, even if there is a landslide, as we see in 2022. What's happening is because those general elections don't matter, it all focuses on the primaries, and by focusing on the primaries, it really is a pay-to-play of who gets to even be in the game. Let me illustrate that in some numbers to you to show how this money's come. If you run today as a challenger, your probability of receiving substantial money is nearly zero. If you look in the 2020 cycle, and look at all the money that financial institutions gave into that 2020 election, $1 million went to challengers. 89 million went to incumbents. 89 million, 89 to 1. Healthcare, roughly the same situation. 400,000 to challengers, $47 million to the incumbents. Today, understanding Congress people spend well over 50% of their time raising money, not interacting with you, not dealing with the problems of this country, not trying to find solutions. They're out raising money. If you're in leadership, you actually have a quota of how much money you have to raise just to stay within leadership. Congress simply doesn't work today. It's become hypocritical. And if you don't believe it, think of the last 2 weeks of a simple bill to prohibit the trading by Congresspeople of stock. They couldn't even get a vote on it. Today, in the Wall Street Journal, you see where the FTC, who deals with enormous issues of business issues, they are trading stock. Those people are trading stock in the companies of the decisions that they make. This is a system that's enormously broken, and it's one that has to be addressed because today, Congress does not have any sense of representing you. I think there's good people that went in there, but they've been overcome by the system. Think today of the pension system. Your pension system, for most of you, has changed substantially over the last 20 years. In Congress, they have a pension system that I can tell you nobody in this room has. It is absolutely hypocritical the way Congress is acting today, both in terms of taking the money, structuring their jobs, and playing in games that show conflict of interest. That fundamentally is the problem. And what happens is if you spend 20 years in Congress, to be frank with you, your only focus is being there for the next 2 years or 6 years, whichever the case may be. Because I can guarantee you that you cannot recreate the money or stature that you have on the private side. So unfortunately, what was on page 269 of the Federalist Papers of the idea of people coming in, giving up their roles in private society to serve all of us and then leave, that's been completely lost. And that's a fundamental problem.
Could I add one thing that's really interesting? Because while we're talking about campaign finance and money that members of Congress get when they're running for office and when they actually have a campaign committee, they can get unlimited amounts of money when they are not running from outsiders. They can get it from federal contractors. They can get it from lots of places. So that's
and they can
huge,
keep it afterwards.
And they keep it afterwards. Exactly. And I think that's really important because most people don't know that.
Well, one of the real challenges is look at the number of Congress people who went in with almost no net worth, had a salary of about $175,000 and 2 residents. And within 10, 15 years, they come out with a net worth of $10 million. I just wish I had those people running my money.
Yeah, so we've touched on now, Tom, thank you, bringing in the systemic issues. It's not sort of a linear problem where if we just fix this campaign finance problem or that campaign finance problem, we fix it. We're seeing the systemic effects where it's almost a societal, certainly a political corruption at a systemic level. And as Ann said, the court will not recognize systemic corruption as a reason to enable us to enact laws. They'd say that still violates free speech. She used the Latin quid pro quo. Corruption is the only thing the Supreme Court says we are allowed to enforce. Quid pro quo, I learned from Stanley Kaplan, means pay to play, basically. It's literally like a bag of cash. So we can still enforce a law that says you shall not drop a bag of cash on your senator's desk and get a law passed in exchange. But that's about it. So we now have the systemic corruption problem. I happened to read I can't even remember where I saw it, but Mrs. Vanderbilt 100 plus years ago, who refused to invite the U.S. senator from New York to a dinner party and was pressed about how come you won't have a senator at your dinner party. She says, I don't invite the butler to dinner. And so that was systemic corruption, but maybe a little more quid pro quo than we're seeing now. But
Jeff, I'll illustrate that with numbers if you want. So you have to go back a couple of cycles. But there were 57,000 people that maxed out in the United States 2 cycles ago on elections. 57,000. That was a majority of the money that went into those campaigns. As a professor at Harvard pointed out, 0.02%, which is that population, is exactly the percentage of people that nominated the head of Hong Kong under the under the Chinese Communist Party.
Wow, well, that puts a point on it, doesn't it? So one thing we can take, though, from the Vanderbilt story is we can do better. That was 10 or so constitutional amendments ago. We've had, and I think that's what you see in America, is cycles of corruption, and it seems to all fall apart, and renewal. And I want to bring John Wass into the conversation because he is betting on renewal, as am I, and American Promise. And John's perspective is from a person who has not been involved in politics in his career, not been involved in even the nonprofit world. I've known John for 25 years or so, and he, all the time I've known him, has been building businesses. He helped scale up Staples. Then he sold his last company to Cardinal Health. Like some others here probably, that wasn't enough. He kind of loves it, so he started another company, which he's now the CEO of, called Profit Isle. And yet he co-founded American Promise 5 years ago and serves as our board chair. So this is sort of what's a person like you doing in a place like this, John? Because I think that it is telling that I don't think John is alone of people who weren't planning on getting involved in politics or nonprofit, but find himself here. What happened, John? What brought you to do this work?
You mean besides you? So actually, there are 2 key reasons why I'm involved in American Promise and why we got started. The first is I'm a huge fan of free enterprise. My career is based on doing new and interesting things in business and seeing the rewards accumulate to people who have talent and really enjoying the competition of that. I've also done business overseas quite a bit. I spent a lot of my time selling in Russia, the Middle East, and other places around the world, including China, though I avoid China when I can. And what I found was there's a big difference between free enterprise and crony capitalism. Outside the United States, there is a very clear historical pay-to-play environment. And you know you can't do business in Russia unless you pay off someone in the FSB. And American companies have known that. They've done that forever. And we actually have lots of laws about how to control that. And the same thing is true in the Middle East and so forth. And so I'd come back to the United States. I'd sit at the dinner table with the kids and say, I am so happy to be home again. I just love being in the United States. It's an incredible country. And then to have my kids who are well-educated say, Dad, you're full of it. This isn't great. Can't you see around you all this corruption, all these other things going on? And for me, it's like I was coming home thinking this is a wonderful place. And then my kids are opening my eyes to saying it's happening here. And my current company is, I sell software to large multinational companies. And the name of the company is Profit Isle, and we help them improve their profitability. I deal at the board of director level and the CEO level. And one of the major issues that I've observed over the last 6 or 7 years is, the CEOs are in really difficult positions. Not a lot of people feel sorry for CEOs, but nonetheless, they have a difficult situation because politicians are showing up all the time saying, it's $50,000 this year. And you go, well, what do you mean? What do you mean? And, well, I need that money. And if you don't do it, I'm going to go across the street. And I just came from Houston, and they literally go to the next building and basically say, if I don't get it from you, I'm going to get it from your competition. And there are lots of things that I influence, and if you don't pay to play, you're going to be outside. One of our clients was a major manufacturer in Michigan. They didn't have their man in Washington, and their stuff was not on that tariff exception list. They got hammered. And it's, it can't be more clear than that. It's sort of like their competition had their guy in Washington, and they paid, it was something on the order of about $50,000 a line. But when you start negotiating basically with the government and saying, how much is that one going to cost? You know you have a deeply fundamental problem. This is no longer free enterprise. This is crony capitalism in the United States. It's awful. It's a shock to the system. And I think that what really got me involved was seeing it happen and having my kids tell me that this is going on. I'm so focused on doing my thing and feeling so wonderful relative to the rest of the world, and having my kids basically say, pay attention. And they also said, and if you really believe in this stuff you keep talking about, put your money where your mouth is and do something. So Jeff and I started this, and the reason we're doing it is we're taking a lot of the principles that I've worked on in business and all the understanding that Jeff has brought to this issue to create American Promise to make sure that we're going to get this constitutional amendment to happen. When we started this, I told Jeff, I'm not doing this to make myself feel better. I'm doing this to win. We're not doing this just because it's the right thing to do. We want to make something happen, make a change, and make sure that we're passing something along to our children that's more sustainable. At 250 years, the United States will be the longest-lived democracy in the history of humanity. And unless we do something, it's going to go the way of the Roman Empire and some other places where we're going to see too much consolidation of power, and we're going to lose our republic. And it's going to be a miserable thing that we leave our children unless we do something about it. So the other thing that Jeff and I do is we talk to people like you around the country, and we basically say, we are living in a blessed society. This is unbelievable in terms of how wonderful it is relative to just about anything else in the world. And we have to work to keep it. So I do hope all of you, whether you believe in this or not, are active civically. It's really important because one of the other things that you see how that money is going up, hundreds of billions, 1.6, 1.7 billion. We just saw new corporations. There's one guy who basically gave $1.6 billion to the right and said, knock yourself out, spend it any way you want in politics. And we have another one who just did it on the left saying, knock yourself out, here's a whole company worth $3 billion, take it. That's what's going on right now. It's a war of how much money you can spend, whether you're on the right or the left. It doesn't make any difference. We're seeing a massive consolidation of spending in politics, and that's dangerous. In the business world, when we see monopolistic practices, we know that free enterprise is dead. And you basically have to go and break those things up, or you don't have a robust society or a robust economy. Because those things tend to keel over and die. It's just a question of when, and they take a lot out when they come down. And I think the same thing is really happening, and we, as a lot of the people who have benefited from this society, really need to stand up and do something. And what that journey is for you, only you can know. But what I will tell you is that there is a very real responsibility to being a citizen of the United States. And we really hope that coming out of this, you feel the urge to do something and to get involved. We think that it's really fundamentally structural and systemic. And the reason we're doing a constitutional amendment is that it takes constitutional amendments to both unify the country, which is the process is critical, and it takes that to establish the key principles that need to move forward. We believe strongly that you here in Texas should figure out how you want your elections run. How do you elect your school boards? Because right now, we know, a lot of people know that there's Russian money in here, there's Chinese money in here, and they're affecting your school boards. I mean, you think it's just presidential elections, you're missing the boat. It is moved because all that money keeps sliding around till where it finds a place to have influence. So it's a very real threat to the United States. I feel that all of us should be aware of that.
John,
and
let me jump
whether
in
it's
on
this or
that.
not, I'm going to stop right there. But we really do want to have you guys get involved, whether it's with us or something else, but it's really critical.
Thanks, John. And we're going to say more, but we don't want to leave you with the darkness and because it is, but we do need to accept the challenge. We've heard up here that we're in a we're in a hole that we got to get out of, and so we think we have a constitutional solution. Let's dig into that a little bit. Constitutional amendments are hard. As I said, 2/3 of Congress, ratification in 38 states. They happen when the country takes a consensus that has been built and turns it into the power to actually overcome the forces that are against it. We have that consensus, we think, in this country. The question is, will we come together to win it? And we think if we do, if you look at American history, we did 4 constitutional amendments between 1961 and 1971. We did 4 constitutional amendments between 1910 and 1920. We did 3 constitutional amendments after the Civil War. We did 10 after the Revolutionary War. So they come in bundles, usually when everything is falling apart. So I think it validates Winston Churchill, who said Americans always do the right thing after exhausting all the other possibilities. So we think we're in one of those periods, and we'll probably see 3 or 4 amendments. I think we'll probably see term limits. I think we'll see something about fiscal responsibility. I think we'll see a constitutional renewal, and we'll see this amendment too. So my own prediction, we might have other predictions, but let's dig in. How, Ann, do you know the Supreme Court cases? Can't the court fix this? Do we need a constitutional amendment?
Yes, we need a constitutional amendment. The court is not going to fix it. There is no question.
All right.
That they are not.
And so if we had, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, unions had been regulated on money spent since Taft-Hartley, 1948, corporations since 1912, probably, before this recent wave.
Well, they couldn't give direct contributions to either corporations or unions, but now they can.
Yeah, and PACs had limits as well, but now they don't have limits.
That's exactly.
So are those some of the things that an amendment would enable? We could actually have limits, and you couldn't just write a $100 million check?
Yeah, no question about it. You can make a difference by doing that because the court isn't going to agree on its own. And yet, if there's a constitutional amendment, they have to abide by it.
Yeah.
So there can be limitations that exist. And, I know this is not your question, but I just am dying to add to his $1.6 billion, not to make people feel worried or upset about this, but in midterms, there's usually not that much money being spent. But in this one, they're expecting over $8.3 billion being spent in the midterm, and that doesn't account for the $1.6 billion.
Yeah.
This comes from Open Secrets.
Yeah, amazing. Tom, I tossed out a few amendments. Do you think we're in a constitutional moment in American history? You've got your finger on the sort of political and national pulse. Is this?
I hope so, and you've touched on some that I think are absolutely critical. Clearly, the fiscal responsibility one is one that's completely got out. It is very easy, and I saw it at the local level, much less at the federal level. It is very easy to give away money and to buy votes. That's exactly what happens. You see it at the city of Dallas, you especially see it in Congress. And without having some fiscal constraint there, then we're going to continue to see it. And if any of you believe that inflation just happened to happen, this is self-inflicted. It's self-inflicted by our fiscal policies and self-inflicted by our monetary policies. As you can imagine, I'm also a great advocate on term limits. I think the structural situation has changed enough that we need to have term limits. And Congress people that say they're for it, don't believe them. Until they give you a commitment that they'll get out in 3 terms, 2 terms, whatever it may be, all they're doing is pandering to you. If they really believe it, they'll give up their pension. They'll have a pension similar to yours. Get rid of the hypocrisy on this. So I do believe that some of these things should be a constitutional amendment, and I probably am a little bit different in the sense that I do not want the Supreme Court to start legislating things. If the Supreme Court says that's what the Constitution says, then I'm happy with it. Then the people's responsibility is to make the changes. That's through the constitutional amendment process. That was put in by our founders. That should be the vehicle we do it. It should not be a limited number of people that decide what popular opinion is or what their personal preference is.
Yeah, couldn't agree more, Tom. Our Harrisburg Chamber CEO I mentioned, Dave Black, has an editorial op-ed in Pennsylvania. He said the Supreme Court has said it's unconstitutional to have reasonable limits on money in our elections. Well, it's our job to make it constitutional. And fundamentally, that's the thing. You don't fight and divide and beat up the Supreme Court. They tried their best, but ultimately, we the people are responsible for the Constitution. So the amendment's the way to go, we think, at American Promise, and it's happening. 22 states have formally taken action. Not Texas yet.
We're working on it.
We're working on it. Yeah, and then and there are commitments in Congress that are building, and increasingly cross-partisan support.
Yeah, I actually want to make one point. is a very strong Republican rationale here. We were just up on the Hill. We had a national lobby day with a national conference. And I spent my time in Republican Senate chamber, talking to Republicans. I'd sort of from a little bit more on that side of the world. And it's a very strong, legitimate, deeply principled approach on the Republican side, just equally, deeply, strongly on the Democratic side. We're not asking everyone to have the same vision. Each party is coming to this table with a separate set of beliefs, but with exactly the same outcome. The Republicans are very concerned about foreign money influencing our elections. Not that everyone isn't, but that's a very strong Republican point of view. They're also very concerned about the ability of states and local governments to make their own laws, to not be dominated by federal overview. So this is a very federalistic approach to this as well. So those are two key parameters that are resonate very, very strongly in Republican states, including a lot of the people here in Texas, as well as some of the other sort of what you'd perceive to be very strong Republican areas. So we are getting a lot more people than on the Republican side very active now. And the other thing that's happened is anyone can see this is a race to the bottom. We see this, if I'm outspending you with $1.6 billion, it gets harder and harder to say that this is free speech because you're now in it. There's always a bigger fish. Jeff and I first started, we were raising money with what we called Millionaire from Microsoft. And they were basically saying, we're out. The level is too high now. We don't even play anymore because it now costs a few $100 million to play. And you can see that in all these numbers. So we're seeing a tighter and tighter concentration. And more people are seeing that this is becoming untenable even for people who thought that they could influence elections. So
with that, let's open it up to your questions, because I think fundamentally the way Americans get big things done is by talking with each other. So we have a microphone coming around, some hands up, and we'll start right over here.
I'm curious as how you are going to approach the idea that we want to stop what you're benefiting from. Because it's going to be the Congress and Senate that are going to vote for this. Now, how are we, I love the idea, but how are we going to have these folks vote for something that is against something that is benefiting them?
Maybe I'll take that one as American Promises strategy, and others can weigh in. We're very realistic. We don't think we're governed by angels, to say the least, and Tom's sort of diagnosis of Congress, we think is fairly accurate. So it has to be in their interest. It won't be because they're going to vote themselves out of office. The way we make it in their interest is to make it an issue that people will get elected because they support this. They'll get defeated if they don't support this. So we're not there yet, but with your help, we will be, and that's true. And again, we don't care what party. We have a candidate pledge at American Promise, and we have Republicans and Democrats and independents, and a new party, Forward Party people, have taken this pledge. And we'd like to see that. So we also don't beat up people. We go to talk with, say, Senator Cruz. We'd love to have, folks here in Texas who are Republicans and know Senator Cruz come and talk to him. And so to make this an issue where you're doing it because you see that it actually helps your political career, even though it also helps the country. If we can get those two things aligned, we'll do it. And I often look to history. Here's another one. Unelected, all-male senators voted for constitutional amendments for women to vote and to make senators have to be elected. So both of those are things that, in theory, and probably actual, meant they were voting against what the power was that brought them there. But they had to because of what the American people did. So we see that a lot. I think we'll see that here.
And the other one is just we have a very states-based strategy. So we're working at the state level to get either basically the state legislature to say that's what they want and to instruct their congresspeople. And also sometimes they have the ability to do ballot initiatives, and also those are very impactful in states where they're allowed.
Okay.
Got questions. Section 3, you talk about artificial entities. How much power will the state have to define what is an artificial entity and to restrict it?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And there's sort of a lot of different ways to look at it. So one interesting wrinkle that is new in this field of constitutional law about spending money in elections is the notion that corporations are simply like people. Now, if you're a solo, small business person and you incorporate it, it sure feels like that. If you're a global, trillion-dollar company owned by a set of sovereign funds from, say, Saudi Arabia and Norway, or shareholders that are changing by the second, are you really a person? That's one notion of artificial entity that I think some states would be able to make distinctions about. They're not all the same, and Virginia has allowed corporations to make contributions. Other states don't before all this. So, the states will have room. The other artificial entity thing, though, is very real. We're dealing with what our problems as we see them now. What about our kids in 2040 or 2050? When you got artificial intelligence, you got AI, you got digital currencies, you got all kinds of things we can't even anticipate yet. If we want to keep this grounded in humans and governing ourselves, we're going to have to make distinctions. And whether that's at the federal level or the state level, that is a matter of policy that policymakers will have to wrestle with.
Okay, we have other questions.
Thank you for this great presentation, by the way. I believe the handout shows the constitutional solution that you're proposing, and a proposed amendment with 3 sections. Is that what you're?
That's correct, yeah.
Well, this is great. It deals with the problem of the constitutional problem and dealing with fixing the interpretation of the court, but it also implies that that the Congress and the state legislatures will then have to act on that. So my question is, how do we get from fixing the constitutional problem to the actual action on the part of Congress and the legislatures to actually regulate and control spending?
Yeah. I'll give a preliminary and then others can dive in. So we are fixing the constitutional problem. The one way American Promise is able to be so effective and so united and hold people together is we're focused on that problem. You might have 4 different views as to what the state of Texas or the Congress should do once we have the constitutional authority to do that. I'll bet there'll be big areas of overlap, though. So what we'll need to do immediately is shut the door on foreign money. I don't think anybody is going to argue that we ought to allow foreign governments to spend money to influence our elections without, by running it into super PACs. I think you'll see basic rules about corporate money or union money. I think you'll see reasonable limits on PACs, things like that. And then there'll be space for arguments. Some people will say, hey, we ought to fund elections with public funding and prohibit private funding altogether. Other places would say, that's welfare for politicians over my dead body. We're never using tax dollars. And we say, let that debate flow, let different states try different things, and we'll figure it out. But if we don't have the constitutional ability to, we're in trouble. So are there other ideas you guys want to throw out, John or Ann or Tom, about getting the actual laws implemented after the constitutional amendment?
My attitude is let it rip. I mean, basically let the democracy do its thing, and it'll flop all over the place. Some places they may not change a thing, and that would be awful, but the other places will basically step in. And I just have a fundamental belief that when people can do something, they'll fill in that space to do something, because if history is any example, we've done this many, many times. Different outcomes, but I fully expect that it would be a distributed event, and I guess about half the people be unhappy with the outcome and half the people be happy with the outcome, but at least they get to do it.
Okay, we're running out of time, so we better get to this last question.
I was following up on the question because I too find the term artificial to be quite troubling. And if you say corporations shouldn't have protection, I just remember that Washington Post and the New York Times and CNN are corporations. And it seems to me you are removing constitutional protection from these corporations and then opening up any corporation, like a newspaper, to have freedoms curtailed by politicians who don't like them?
So thank you. It's an important question about the intersections of different constitutional protections, free speech. This is pointing to free press. The press, the First Amendment, of course, says freedom of speech and of the press shall not be violated. It also has freedom of conscience and religion. There's a great book called Madison's Music. It's actually the First Amendment really contains a kaleidoscope of freedoms that are about speech, debate, conscience, freedom of viewpoint. I am a First Amendment absolutist. This isn't about a First Amendment carve-out. This is about strengthening the First Amendment in all of its components, including free press. I've represented journalists to defend their right to speak and write as they please. But it is a very important question that how do you draw that line, especially with big global media companies that are also press, but they're also corporations. And I think we do it already, and we don't know we do it, but the SEC, you don't get an exception to the rules about the securities laws because you have a newspaper or media aspect. The court has always been able to distinguish what is a regulation that doesn't actually limit or suppress or choose between viewpoints and what is a generally applicable rule, like employment laws or, in this case, election spending laws. If Washington Post wants to say whatever it wants, or Fox News wants to say whatever it wants, it will be able to, in my view. If they want to write checks to super PACs, they'll have to follow the same rules as everybody else. So thank you. But that doesn't diminish the seriousness and the challenge of the question. And so the beauty of a constitutional approach is the court isn't going away. The First Amendment is as solid as ever. It's just giving better guidance to the court to hopefully get better outcomes, not solving every single issue. So it's an important question. I'm personally, and I think most people are comfortable that freedom of the press, as it has been before, we've regulated media companies before when they got too powerful in a single community. There were laws that said, you can't dominate all the news. When we had radio licenses.
But those laws have been overturned. So just to be clear, someone did something, and they basically said that's no longer the law. Congress passed changes to move that so that it could be consolidated, so that you now have global multimedia companies controlling the vast majority of television stations. So we see multiple sides of this. So while I see that, I understand the different points of view, but we've also seen the real politic of this, which is people have gone in and changed these laws. We had these laws. We had these laws for a lot of those reasons, which was so you couldn't control the media in a particular locale. Those laws were overwritten by Congress. If you want to look at the history of that one, it's an interesting look. And what's gone on now is we have a massive consolidation of media, and that was facilitated by money changing the laws of the land through the use of those funds in Congress. So we want to look around. It's all around, so it's easy to see. But the intent is that we want Americans to have control of their locale, whether it's making sure that their media isn't overrun or making sure that their voting systems aren't overrun by a lot of people from the outside. That's what we're looking to do, is make sure that that's the American dream, is that you get to do this and control some of this stuff. So
Yeah,
Real quick,
I see
one
one more.
last question, yeah.
So this question is mostly geared to Miss Ann. Do you think that slowing the flow of money to politicians, do we have the chance of stopping career politicians or slowing them down?
I missed part of that. The beginning part, I couldn't hear.
Do you think by slowing the flow of money into these politicians, do we have the chance of slowing career politicians?
Well, yes, you might, because politicians need money, especially when they're running. But they need money always. But I think that would really make a difference as well. whether you could do that, whether there's a legal way to do that or not is not
And does that go to the incumbent advantage essentially now that Tom was speaking of earlier?
Yes.
And, Tom, sorry.
I might try to answer that even a little bit more broadly. And maybe it goes to what you were saying of how this hall falls apart. Institutions only exist because there's trust. This club only exists because you trust that when you come it's going to clean. You trust that the food you're going to eat is safe. Today what we have is every institution in America, there is declining trust. Not only the shot or the slide that you saw on Congress, people don't trust the FBI because it's been politicized. And for the first time ever, trust in the military has fallen below 50% because it's being politicized. Historically, if you look at wide looks at our country, there was about 10 to 14% of the people that were politically centric. They were the people who were tied to politics. They were a staff member at Congress, they were a lobbyist for the Girl Scouts, et cetera, but they were tied to politics. And then there was about 25% of the people in the nation who didn't know who the President of the United States was. They were completely apolitical. The world worked because of the 2/3 in between, which is you. You're interested, you're engaged, you vote, but you also have a soccer game to go to on Sunday and you're going to have dinner with your family. What's happening, though, is because of all this money coming into it, that 10%, 14% at the bottom, that's moving to 20%. And because of the politicization, now we're seeing that 25% is a lot closer to 33%. Said a different way, there's not many people in the middle anymore that are going to support and build and sustain the country.
Okay.
Yeah.
I hope it-
We have time for one more?
Exactly.
Quick question. Do y'all have a package that you're rolling out, you're handing to people in various states for a state initiative to go and testify before the state legislatures, the appropriate committees, so that they can do a bipartisan support for this particular term limits? I've done that on national sales tax at the state level in Texas, but I put together the whole package for other people in other states to do it. Do y'all, as a practical application, already have that paperwork for people to hand out to them so they can go and do this around the country?
Well, I'll take that real quick. It's that, yes, please sign up at AmericanPromise.net so we can find you, AmericanPromise.net. Indicate you want to volunteer. What we do is actually engage with folks on the ground. Talk to Ann. We'd love to start a conversation in Austin about this, and Ann can get you plugged in. And we have a lot of, our job is to support that. So those kind of handouts, that kind of support, absolutely. So thank you so much, everybody. How about a big hand for our panel? Thank you. And thank you, Ann.
So I have some real quick closing announcements. One, lawyers in the room, make sure that you put your bar card number on the sign-in sheet so that you get your 1 hour of CLE. Everybody has a survey. We would love for you to take our survey. You can either fill it out and leave it on the registration table, or take it home and fill it out and scan it to us, or there's a QR code, you can do it online. But we will be having some meetings in congressional offices next year, and I'm particularly interested in finding out if any of you would like to join us for some of those meetings. And then finally, the plants on your tables are Salvia greggi. This is a Texas perennial, a native perennial. It likes full sun, it's heat and drought tolerant. Please take them home, plant them, and enjoy them. I don't want to take any home because I already have some. Thank you all very much for coming. Have a great day.